Darwin saw that we were all related. Every living thing shares an ancestry. He concluded that vast diversity of life on Earth results from processes at work over millions of years and still at work today. The theory of evolution by natural selection transformed our understanding of the living world. Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection underlies all modern biology, and his theory remains unchallenged as the central concept of biology. This video will give a few of the exciting exhibits that surround the discoveries of Charles Darwin. Many naturalists had collected and studied plant and animal specimens, but very few speculated that species had evolved, that is, that all life shared a common ancestry. Why didn't more people grasp that similarities in skeletal structures so clearly visible were a clue that species were related? How are we related? In the years before Charles Darwin, man was not considered to be an animal. He was considered above animals. Darwin's research gives us new insight discovered if we are related. Some of the skeletons in this display are from land creatures, and some of them lived in the water. Can you tell which ones did? What do all of these skeletons have in common? Well, if you guess that they're all vertebrates, then you guessed right. Some of these animals walked on all four legs, while some of them walked and stood upright. The shapes are different, but they are all vertebrates. Geology had a strong influence on Darwin's imagination. By this time, geologists had shown that the Earth was not fixed. It's constantly changing. The slow changes in the Earth later helped shape Darwin's ideas about how plant and animal species had a huge influence on Darwin's thoughts. In 1831, Charles Darwin received a special invitation to join the HMS Beagle as the ship's naturalist for a trip around the world. Darwin sailed on the HMS Beagle for 5 years, collecting data from all around the world. As Darwin's trip progressed, he started noticing similarities and differences in species as he traveled the continents. He noticed that the gauchos, or South American cowboys, hunted a giant bird that was remarkably similar to the ostrich in Africa. He discovered that the rhea was a distant species that, like the ostrich, evolved from a common ancestor. He found two distinct types of giant birds called the greater and the lesser rhea in South America. Darwin is best known for his study of the creatures of the Galapagos Island. He discovered that species were different from one island to another. Of all the unusual creatures on the Galapagos Islands, the most impressive are the huge Galapagos tortoises. Each island was inhabited by unique tortoise species. Can you see the differences in the two giant tortoises? Minor differences distinguish the Galapagos tortoises on each island, but there are also two basic types adapted for different feeding habits. Tortoises from Santa Cruz had dome-shaped shells, and animals with these shells live on islands where most of the vegetation is close to the ground, making it unnecessary to raise their heads to feed. Tortoises from Pinzon, formerly Duncan Island, are saddleback, meaning that their shells rise in the front like a saddle. This adaptation makes it easier for them to lift their necks and feed on taller cactus. How had these species gotten there, and why weren't they the same as those on similar islands around them? Darwin found fabulous fossils that are amazingly similar to living animals today. Darwin was delighted by the armadillos he saw scurrying about in Argentina. But most intriguing was the striking similarity of these small armored mammals to some of the fossils he was unearthing. One such fossil was a glyptodont, an immense shelled animal that looked like a giant armadillo. Many ancient extinct species seem to be giant versions of living species. The armadillo is very small compared to the giant armadillo that is now extinct. Among the most amazing creatures that Darwin encountered were the iguanas. The iguanas were different from one island to another. This iguana is from Brazil. Notice the green color of this iguana. He lives in the trees, and these animals grow up to 6.5 feet long and are great tree climbers. On each of the Galapagos Islands and in Brazil, the iguanas were uniquely adapted to their environment. Their color varied according to the type of landscape the iguanas lived on, enabling them to blend in with the landscape. These iguanas are dark gray, like the rocks that they crawled over. They lived among other species of birds and crabs that were unique to the islands. Here you see the blue-footed booby and the sally-footed crab. These birds and crabs are only found on the Galapagos Islands. Named for a word meaning foolish person, boobies are known for their complete absence of defensive behavior. Though awkward when walking, blue-footed boobies are swift-flying seabirds that dive from 80 feet and snatch a flying fish out of midair. Darwin found many ancient seashells high above in the rocks at the Falkland Islands. Little grows in these barren islands, and Darwin wanted to know how these seashells ended up so high in the mountains. As Earth went through the changes of evolution, many trees became covered in silt and over a long period of time became petrified wood. Darwin discovered many fossils in and around the petrified wood. At the first stop on his Beagle voyage, Darwin was amazed and enthralled to observe octopus emit clouds of dark ink, squeeze into crevices, glow in the dark, squirt water at him, and change color like a chameleon. He was interested on several occasions by watching the habits of the octopus. By means of their long arms and suckers, they could drag their bodies into very narrow crevices, and when thus fixed, it required great force to remove them. These limbs that look very different and serve different functions, the hand to clasp, bat's wings to fly, the porpoise to swim, are often much alike in skeletal design. This fruit bat was further evidence that large classes of organisms, such as mammals, shared a common ancestry. Here each of the bones in this bat wing has a counterpart in the bones of a human hand. Each of these limbs was either a hand, a wing, a flipper, or a paw. As Darwin traveled around the world, he noticed a great deal of differences between different breeds of horses. He found different skeletal remains of different sizes of horses. The horses of today are much larger than their predecessors. He also discovered that the early horses had 3 toes, and as time went by, climates changed and the horses changed with time. But something happened in the horse in North and South America. Early explorers to the New World brought the modern-day horse we see today. Today horses have only 1 hoof. Can you see the difference in the size between the 2 horses? The horses from millions of years ago were quite small in comparison with today's horses. After the 5-year trip, Darwin settled down to study his findings. He studied and collected pigeons. The pigeons had many different shapes and sizes, and their feathers were all very different. Many people raised and bred pigeons, but through breeding and crossbreeding, Darwin was able to see more clearly how the process of evolution is sped up during breeding. These 3 embryos look the same, but they are different. They are embryos of a little brown bat, a mouse, and a horse. Thanks to Darwin's research, a century and a half ago, Charles Darwin offered the world a single simple scientific explanation for the diversity of life on Earth: evolution by natural selection. Since then, countless scientists, whether fighting viruses, decoding DNA, or analyzing the fossil record, have found that Darwin's work is fundamental to their own. Modern scientists can now answer questions about the natural world in ways Darwin never could. New tools and technologies, such as DNA analysis, can reveal unexpected relationships between seemingly dissimilar groups. Accurate fossil dating methods show the evolution proceeds at variable rates and is not always gradual. So what is natural selection? Natural selection allows species to change and adapt to their environment in order to survive. The color of different species is essential for the survival and their protection. Natural selection explains how over time species have adapted to their environment. Before Darwin's time, humans were not considered part of the natural world. People saw that we resembled other animals, especially other primates like the orangutan and the chimpanzee. Still, despite the undeniable similarities between us and them, only a handful of early naturalists classified humans too as animals.